And today, you're going to learn how you can avoid the top 5 financial regrets of Americans over the age of 50. So if you're like me, 50 or over, then stay tuned to this week's special episode of the Retirement Income Source, where it truly is all about the income. And welcome to this week's episode of the Retirement Income Source, where it truly is all about the income. I'm David Scranton. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Sarah Samuels, and we've got a great show in store for our listeners today, do we not?
Oh, that's right, Dave. We are counting down the top 5 financial regrets of Americans over 50. This was a recent survey. The University of Pennsylvania's Wharton Business School did this survey where they talked to Americans over 50, older Americans, about what they regretted.
Whoa.
What?
Over 50 older Americans? I mean, really, I know you're a little bit younger than me, but I'm having some sort of way with this right now.
I understand, Dave. Let's say slightly older Americans. How about that?
Slightly older. All right.
Slightly older Americans.
So what exactly was the average age of these, quote, older Americans in this survey?
The average age was actually 72, so right smack dab in the middle of retirement.
I guess I'm feeling a little bit better now.
Yeah,
okay.
You still have a few more years before 72.
That's right, true.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it, Dave. I want to take a look at number 5. This is a big one.
Number 5.
Number 5, 23% regret claiming their Social Security benefits too early.
And, that doesn't surprise me because I think about that study, and I can't remember the name. You might remember an Ivy League university actually took 2 sets of children, and they gave them, I believe it was a piece of candy or something, and they said, look, if you eat the candy right away, that's all you're going to get, but if you wait.
Oh, gotcha. The Stanford marshmallow experiment. I think that's what you're talking about, Dave.
Yeah,
it was marshmallows,
not
candy.
That marshmallow candy.
Close enough, right.
Yeah. Well, when you get older, you mess up your words and
your
jumble
memory
them
goes
up.
a little
That's
bit.
right, so you have to forgive me. So apparently it's called the Stanford marshmallow experiment, where one group of children, decided that, yes, they wanted to eat the candy right away, and that's all they were going to get was one piece of candy. But the other group, who waited a certain period of time, I can't remember how long it was, they got rewarded with a second piece of candy. And both groups of children were followed, throughout their lives in this experiment. And what they found was not only those that waited and got the second piece, who appreciated delayed gratification, they had more financially successful lives because they understood that concept, but also they tended to lead more fulfilled lives too.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me when you say that people who took the Social Security right away might now be regretting it.
Right, and I think it's really important that as children, even some of these people were already showing this proclivity for either instant indulgence or being able to wait, and that characteristic of their personality followed them throughout life. I wonder how many of those kids that took that candy right away took their Social Security benefits at age 62 as soon as they were eligible.
That's right. And I bet they were the same group. Most of them.
We need to do a survey, I think, on that.
Hold on, I need a second though. I need our producer, Rich. Can you give me a thesaurus here, or can you look up proclivity for me, because Miss Smarty Pants here is using big words, so maybe he could help me out.
That's $100.
Tendencies. There you go. There's a nice synonym.
No, but I think you're right. I think the issue here is that it's human nature, and you tend to regret sometimes if you do something too early, because you think, gosh, if I take Social Security at 62 versus waiting to 67, full retirement age, let alone 70, just 67, wow, 5 years, that's a long time. But even at your age, Sarah, boom, you snap your fingers and 5 years flies by, right? And I think that's where people, that 5 years goes by and they regret it and they think, wow, I could be getting a lot more right now had I just waited.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads us into our Ask Dave question, which is about Social Security. So this is a very good question. It's Veronica. We have email Veronica from Arkansas. She says, I retired a few years ago and I'm collecting Social Security benefits. However, I'm thinking about going back to work, at least part-time. How will that affect my Social Security benefits?
All right, Veronica. Well, great question. And it really depends in large part on your age. If you get to full retirement age, which is between 66 and 67, and again, I don't know how old you are, but if you're at your own full retirement age, FRA, then you can go back to work, you can earn as much as you want, and you will not get a reduction of Social Security benefits. However, if you are under that age, then you will get a reduction. I believe in 2023, you can only earn $21,000 a year or so. And every dollar you earn over that forces you to give back 50 cents of your Social Security benefits. So essentially, you're only working for 50 cents on a dollar up to a certain point. Now, Veronica, even if you're over full retirement age, even though you won't get any reduction in benefits, you may still have your benefits get taxed more heavily. Some folks have to pay no taxes on their Social Security, but if you have enough other income, you may have to claim as much as 85% of those benefits as taxable income on your tax return. So again, you have to look at your age and you have to look at reduction of benefits because you went to work, and then taxation of benefits based upon your total income from all sources.
Veronica, thank you so much for sending in your question. If any of our listeners out there have a retirement question that you would like Dave to answer, all you have to do is email us at askdave@theRetirementIncomeSource. That's SOURCE.com. You're listening to The Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. And today we're counting down the top 5 financial regrets of Americans over 50, and most importantly, ways that you can avoid making some of these same mistakes. So Dave, we've talked about so far, the 5th regret on the list was that about almost 1 in 4 people, so 23% of Americans over 50 say that they regret taking their Social Security benefits too early.
Sure.
Now, my question for you, Dave, are there any pros to taking your benefits at 62 years old, as soon as you're eligible?
There could be. And you see, there are hundreds of ways to take Social Security benefits, and that number gets even larger if you're married, because now there's all different combinations and permutations of you take it first, or he takes it first, or vice versa, and so on. And that complicates the equation a lot. So here are some of the factors you need to think about. The first factor, of course, as you would imagine, right, is life expectancy. Now, we don't know how long we're going to live, right?
Right. No crystal ball, unfortunately.
That's right. But if you get to Social Security age, Sarah, and God forbid, that you, and of course the question is, will Social Security even be around when you're
Right.
of
I don't
Social
know,
Security
Dave.
age?
It might be gone by that
So maybe
time.
you're a bad example.
Yeah.
But when you get to Social Security, if you have a reason to believe that your life expectancy is going to be short, maybe cancer issues or heart disease, or maybe every single person in your family died by age 70, then you might want to gamble and say, I'm going to take the Social Security benefits early. However, if you don't have a specific reason to think you might die long before life expectancy, or even more so if you have longevity in your family, then you probably want to consider delaying it, because generally speaking, if you take 62 versus 70, right? 62 is when you get the biggest reduction in benefit, and 70 is when you get the biggest additional credits for delaying it. Your break-even point is around age 80. In other words, if you
have
get
to make
the
it to
benefits,
80
yeah, if you get
to
it
make
from
it work.
62 to 80,
Okay.
18 years you get a reduced benefit, versus you start taking it 70 and you get a higher benefit for 10 years. Those break even just about age 80.
Okay.
So just on that math, and that's only one factor, but just upon that math, you've got to say, do I want to bet on me making it past 80 or not making it past age 80?
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting, Dave. I think a lot of people, they just want to take their benefits early because they look at it as almost, oh, free money or money I've earned from the government, right? Because we all know the government has a little Social Security trust checking account for each of us, right?
Well, yeah,
And that's where they put all our tax money from each paycheck.
Of course, our money doesn't get commingled. It's totally separate. It's
Right.
for us, and it's got our name on it. That's right.
Right. Well, of course, we know that doesn't happen. Like Dave said, we might not even have Social Security in, 5 years from now. So that was a great, all right, let's just cut right here. I've gone retarded. Let me just do the tease.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're ready for the tease.
All right, back on. All right, Dave, so what was the 4th biggest regret for Americans over 50? I'll share the details next.
I'm David Scranton, here with Sarah Samuels, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it truly is all about the income.
You're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it truly is all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels, and I'm here with my good friend and our host, David Scranton, as we count down the top 5 financial regrets of Americans over 50 and ways that you can avoid these regrets. So, Dave, I know that I promised we were going to get to the number 4 regret right after the break, but I want to delve into Social Security just a little bit more, because I know I've heard you say this several times. Social Security, it's not just about your life expectancy.
No, it's not, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's just one person who's retired by him or herself trying to make a decision. But now it gets more complicated, like I said. So you're married, right? And when one person passes away, if the other spouse is living, there's ramifications there, because essentially the living spouse gets the higher of the 2 benefits but gives up the lesser of the 2 benefits. So even if you might think, hey, nobody in my family lived to age 70, But if you married somebody who, hey, their life expectancy is much longer, or they're in great shape, their families live longer, then you still may want to consider delaying it if you're the primary breadwinner. But like also Veronica, right?
Our Ask Dave question
that's
a
right.
few minutes ago.
That's right. Veronica came and said, well, how about what if I go to work? Well, another part of it is, are you still going to be working? Because if you are and you plan to make over $20,000 a year, you probably don't want to take it before your full retirement age of 66 to 67, in that range. Again, depending upon your birth year. And even if you don't plan to go back to work, part of it is taxation on Social Security, right? Because Social Security under a certain threshold is not taxed, and then parts of it get taxed in increasing increments until finally as much as 85% of it might be taxable.
Yeah, that's right.
And you got to look at it with other investments, Sarah, because here's the other thing. You may have a lot of taxable investments, or you might have a huge IRA where at age 72, boom, RMDs, required minimum distributions kick in, and then you've got to start turning on the faucet, and you have a lot more taxable income. So that may be a reason to take it early. So there's lots of reasons to really consider whether you're taking early or take it late. So unfortunately, I can't answer your question that easily in terms of, hey, when does it make sense to take it early? There's lots and lots of factors.
Right. Social Security, just one piece of that pie, that income you can't outlive, right?
That's one piece, the income you can't outlive. And that's why a true income specialist, as you know, as we do, has software that we purchase, specifically software that the Social Security Administration doesn't have, that specifically can help calculate all the different combinations and permutations of how to take it, put in your personal fact pattern, help determine what the best ways are for you to get the benefits. Because as you know, Sarah, sometimes the difference between taking it the number one best way versus the number two best way could be another 100,000 or more of cumulative benefits over the course of your lifetime.
And you don't want to miss out on that extra money if you can get it, right, Dave?
You paid into the system, you deserve it, why not?
Right. Well, let's get into number 4 now. So our fourth regret on the list. 33% of Americans over 50 say they regret not investing more in a lifetime annuity or a similar product that would produce guaranteed income for life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and first of all, Sarah, I want to say I appreciate you going backward and starting with 5 and going down to number 1. Because I am 3/4 Polish, my heritage, so I like doing things backwards. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm trying to build some excitement with our listeners, Dave. We can't just start off with number 1. That wouldn't be very fun, right? We'd have a short show. So we'll start with number 5. Count out, ready, Dave? 4, 3, 2, 1. You got that?
This is like Johnny Carson used to do. He used to start and he used to work his way back to number 1. Hold on. You don't know who Johnny Carson is, does you?
Hey, I know who Johnny Carson is.
You do? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Dodged a bullet there. So it doesn't surprise me that people regret not having an annuity because, in Johnny Carson's era, for example, most people had an old-fashioned pension plan that paid you monthly income for the rest of your life, no matter how long you lived, and that was great. Essentially, that was an annuity. But now most of us, as you know, Sarah, don't have that type of pension anymore.
No.
And people regret the fact that they don't have the pension that maybe their parents or grandparents had.
Yeah. Well, let's get into our Ask Dave question because this really has to do with pensions and on all Social Security and annuities as well. So we have Cody from Alaska, and he says, what type of annuity do you think I should invest in? Are there other options for income besides annuities? Well, Cody, you came to the right place.
All right, Kodiak from Alaska. So annuities are an option, and there's lots of different types of annuities. Annuities are truly the good, the bad, and the ugly. Some annuities have very high fees. Some have no fees at all. Some pay a guaranteed income. Some don't. Some tie your money up for a long time. Others don't. So again, it truly is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And people love to come out and say, I hate annuities, and you should too. Or I love annuities. You should put all your money in annuities. Like most things, Cody, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. But I'm glad to hear you ask about whether or not there are other options, because there are a whole universe really of income generating options, and we can't do justice to it right now. But Cody, if you're listening, stay tuned, because we're going to talk about this more just in the next few minutes.
That's right. Well, Cody, thank you for sending us your question. And if any of our listeners out there have a retirement question that you'd like Dave to answer, all you have to do is email us at askdave@theretirementincome.source. That's SOURCE.com. And you might just hear Dave answer your question on one of our future shows. You're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it truly is all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels, and I'm here with Dave Scranton as we count down the top 5 financial regrets of Americans over 50 and tips for you on how to avoid having these same regrets. So, Dave, we just talked about Cody. He was looking at annuities, and he had a very interesting part of his question where he asked, what else is there in the world of income besides annuities? So, can you tell our listeners a little bit more of what other options are out there for them?
That's great. And, you know, like I said, annuities are the good, bad, and the ugly. So they could be right in the right form for the right type of investor, but they're not for everyone. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there, insurance salespeople, annuity salespeople, that would want you to believe that everyone should have most of their money in annuity. It's the greatest thing in the world. And that's simply not true. Like I said, however, those that say, you know, annuities are the devil, you should never consider them, that's often not true either. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, because there are a whole bunch of different types of income-generating investments. In fact, almost any investment you think about, Sarah, can be invested in an income way or a non-income way, a growth way, right? Because it's either growth or income or some combination. So think about stocks, right?
Right.
You can get growth stocks that don't pay a dividend.
Yep.
Or you can get high dividend stocks that have some growth potential, but still you're in it for the dividend.
Right. Almost that guaranteed income, right? Unless, of course, the borrower defaults, but it's almost guaranteed, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's stickier. Companies don't like to cut dividends, but the point is, you know, when you're investing in stock, you can go for no dividend or for a dividend. Bonds, you can have a zero coupon bond like a savings bond where you buy it at this price and it goes up in value to that price. It doesn't pay out any interest. Or you can invest in a regular bond that pays interest. Right? So,
right. So there's a lot of income options there. It's not just about the growth.
There's a lot of income options, and there's preferred stocks, and there's BDCs, and there's REITs. There's lots of different things that you can get in the income world. And like I say, even, you know, you could buy commodities, right? You can go out and buy a metal, and you can write options against it, write covered calls. And even though the metal itself doesn't pay income, those covered calls can actually generate income. So it's an example of how almost anything could be invested in a growth way, like I like to say, a G way, or an income way, an I way.
Now, Dave, would you say that your average financial advisor is familiar with all of these income tools that you can invest in?
Maybe vaguely from a textbook standpoint, but most financial advisors are trained to focus on total return. So we always talk about on the show, of course, the equation, TR, total return, equals I plus G. Total return equals income plus growth. And most advisors are trained to get total return irrespective of whether it's coming from the I or the G. And that's unfortunate. And that's why a lot of retirement planners are really good at helping you get up to retirement, planning for retirement. But that same retirement planner often isn't qualified as an income specialist and isn't best suited to get you through retirement. Because once you get close to retirement, I mean within 10 years or so, now all of a sudden, it's not so much about, gee, I want total return. I don't care whether it comes from the I or the G. Now it's about all of a sudden the I, the income component, takes precedence and really becomes the most important thing that soon-to-be retiree is looking for.
And that's because now that they've left the workforce, they need to replace that income they were getting every couple of weeks, right, when they got that paycheck. That's why that income is so important. So we are counting down the top 5 financial regrets of Americans over 50, and coming up, we're going to talk about the next 2 regrets. So number 2 and number 3 of Americans, slightly older Americans.
Cover 2 in one block?
We're going to cover 2 in one block, Dave, so we got to get right to it.
All right. Sounds good. I'm David Scranton here with Sarah Samuels, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it truly is all about the income.
Thanks for tuning in to the Retirement Income Source, where it truly is all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels, and I'm here with our host, David Scranton, as we count down the top 5 financial regrets of Americans over 50. So far, Dave, we take a look at number 5, 23% regret taking their Social Security benefits too early. Number 4, 33% say they regret not investing more in a lifetime annuity or a similar product that would produce guaranteed income for life. And now, number 3, 40% say that they regret not buying long-term care insurance to pay for a nursing home or similar.
Okay, hold on. I read this script before. And I'm pretty sure, and I appreciate you being able to break the rules here, but I'm ashamed of you. For a girl who went to finishing school, that was not proper. You skipped to number 2, skipped over number 3, but that's okay. We can do. Number 3, long-term care insurance.
All right. Yes. Well, sorry, Dave. I got my numbers confused. You know, us marketing people, we really can't do math.
You get all excited. I know. Well,
Yeah.
well, listen, long-term care insurance, unfortunately, is nothing to get excited about, right? It costs a lot of money, and it's the kind of insurance that you hope you don't need, right? You hope you don't end up in a convalescent home, but you often have it anyway. So I understand the regret, Sarah, why some people wouldn't have purchased it, but I think the regret is really that they didn't look into it at a young enough age. Because some people either didn't look into it at all, they kicked the can down the road, or maybe they just waited to such an advanced age that it was so incredibly expensive they knew there was no way they could buy it. But if they looked at it at a younger age, they probably could have.
Yeah. Dave, what would you say is a good age for our listeners out there if they're interested in long-term care insurance? What age should they start looking into it?
Well, the double-edged sword is you can often start to get it as early as age 40, and the premiums are less then, as a general rule. But the problem is when you're 40, you have a family, oftentimes you have kids, sometimes you're living off one income, you're worried about your disability insurance, what if I get disabled and can't work? You're not thinking about the long-term care. So worst comes to worst, as soon as you become an empty nester, maybe in your 50s for a lot of folks, it would be a great time to say, okay, let me take some of that money that, my boys were devouring in the refrigerator and the food bill every week, right?
Right,
And boom,
grocery bill.
let me look into long-term care.
Yeah.
That might be the right age to look into it. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to rush out and get long-term care insurance, but you have to look into it as part of your retirement plan. You need to figure out if it makes sense for you. In some cases, it makes sense. In some cases, it doesn't. Like, for example, right? If you're barely going to have enough, if you're behind the 8 ball for retirement, and you're barely going to have
saved enough.
Yeah, then you don't need to insure it because you just need to worry about what if you retire and you're actually healthy and want to do things, right? Or if you're so far ahead of it that you've saved enough that you can self-insure, you may not need it either. Yeah. But if you're in that middle, like most Americans, that 80% in the middle, you at least need to look into it and consider it.
Yeah, great news. Well, let's get into our Ask Dave. We have Jim from Iowa, and he says, Dave, how do I know when it's the right time to retire?
All right, Jim. Talk about a complex question, huh, Sarah?
That's tough. You have your crystal ball ready, Dave?
Gee whiz, yeah. Well, there's so many factors, and I assume you're asking financially, but the most important thing is the personal factor, right? Are you ready? Are you at a point where you're moving towards something versus moving away from something, right? The most successful retired people, in other words, those are the happiest and most fulfilled, are those that are retiring because they're moving toward a new chapter in their life and they have things they want to do that they haven't been able to get to. So personally, you need to make sure you're okay with that. If you're just retiring because, you got a new boss and you hate your boss or you're tired of what you're doing, you're moving away from something versus towards something, that might not be the best reason.
Right.
In terms of financial, how to determine financially whether or not you're ready to retire, I think we're going to take a little more time. I think we need to take more time in the rest of this segment of the show, Sarah, to talk about that because that is a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jim, for sending in your question. And if any of our other listeners out there have a question you want Dave to answer, just send us an email at askdave@theretirementincome.source, SOURCE.com, and you might hear Dave answer your question on a future show. All right, let's get into it. Number 2 on our list of the top 5 financial regrets of Americans. 37% of Americans regret not working longer, Dave. Can you believe it? Their biggest regret, their third biggest regret is not working longer. I can't believe it.
That was really slick. I like the way you did that, Sarah. I thought you were just being a rule breaker or trying to rebel against your mom for sending you to finishing school. But you knew that Ask Dave was going to be about living longer or working longer, didn't you?
Right. Well, that's why I chose that Ask Dave question, Jim from Iowa, because I think it's important, and I think this is a very interesting regret that people feel bad they didn't work long enough. And I'm wondering why, Dave. Tell us, why do you think that was the third regret on the list?
Well, some of it is what we said for Jim, right? Because that you retire and you think it's this exciting thing, you've glamorized it, and you picture yourself sitting on the beach drinking pina coladas, right? But you're not going to go to the beach
on a yacht, maybe. Right. My retirement.
You're not going to do, as fun as it is, you're not going to do that stuff every day. And hopefully you're not drinking pina coladas every day, or you have a very short retirement, right? So people get bored. They retire. They don't have a plan for what they're moving toward, and it becomes unfulfilled. And also, they lose their social life, right? Because work is a big part of your social life, right? You know that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Spend 8 hours at least a day here at work. So.
and we're all talking to each other. We're all friends. It's fun, Well, you lose that. And then you go home, and if you don't have a plan for what your retirement's going to look like, it's unfulfilled, and a few years later, you want to go back.
Yeah.
You want to be doing something. So those are non-financial reasons. But you can imagine there's some people who say this because maybe financially they pulled the trigger too early, right?
That's what I'm thinking, Dave. They're taking a look at the recent inflation that's been going on, and they are saying, wow, I wish I stayed in the workforce just a little bit longer to build up my nest egg a bit more.
Sarah, not factoring in inflation is one of the biggest mistakes people make. Gee, I can squeeze as much income out of the financial lemon as possible, and I'll be just there. I'll be okay. I can cut corners. It'll be all right.
Yeah.
And that's great positive self-talk, but then you get inflation, like over the last year, prices going up over 8%, and now you're 8% in the hole. If you thought you can live off $5,000 a month, well, guess what? Now you need $5,400, and you don't have it.
Right.
So inflation is part of it, but part of it also is just not factoring in all the additional things that you're going to be spending money on once you retire, right?
Right. Well, a lot of things go away, Dave. We talk about this, like your gas to and from work. Once you retire, that commute, you don't have that anymore. But you want to have money available to spend on the things you do want to spend money on, right? Like traveling, a big purchase, maybe buying presents for the kids, the grandkids.
Yeah, and again, if you have a plan that you're moving toward, to a fun retirement, then all of a sudden you find you've got 8 to 10 hours in your day available that you didn't have before. It was filled with work and commute, right?
Right, yeah.
So now you've got all this time, and time means that you're going to want to do more things, right?
Yep.
More things mean
And things cost money, right?
things cost money. That's right. I don't care if you want to read a book. Books cost money,
Yep.
right?
Got to buy the book. Or I guess you could go to the library, but if you wanted to own the book, you'd have to buy it.
You could. See, now you're talking like somebody my age about actually walking into
Hey,
a
I
library.
love the public library. It's a great resource.
Yeah, I love the Barnes & Noble right down the street. I go there all the time, and most of these stores are closing down, but here in Southern Florida, there's a lot of people go to Barnes & Noble and hang out. So
well, there's a lot of slightly older Americans that live down here in South Florida.
You gotta bring up the age thing again. Here we go. So, getting back to it, yes, a lot of people just don't realize how much extra money they're going to spend with that extra time. And for most, it means that you don't need less income when you retire. You need the same income, or in many cases, you actually need more income to do the things that you want to do, especially in the early years. Because in the early years, those are what we call the go-go years, right?
Yep, the fun years of retirement, right? When you're traveling, you're visiting the family, you're doing whatever you imagine your retirement would be.
So I retire in 10 years, let's say at age 65, right? At age 65 or age 67, how many go-go years do you think I might really have where Teresa and I can go and travel and do all kinds of fun stuff and what we want before you get too tired?
Well, you guys are pretty healthy, and I know you stay very active. So I would say maybe 10 years at most.
10, maybe
hopefully.
15, maybe 80. God
Crossing
willing,
my fingers
right?
for you and
That's
Teresa.
Right. That's all you get. So in the early years, it's more expenses to do the fun things. And then as you go from your go-go years to your slow-go years where you're not doing as much, then it all changes. But those expenses go down, but then they get replaced with medical expenses and other things that you need to be aware of. So again, retirement is expensive, and it's more expensive than most people think, and that's why I think that was the number 2 element in the survey, is that number 2 regret is that people could and should have worked longer. But Sarah, drum roll please. You want to know what the number 1
Dave, I am dying to know.
Those over the age of 50?
I'm dying to know.
I can't tell you right away.
Aw.
But stay tuned. We'll be right back with the number one most common regret for those of us over the age of 50.
I'm Sarah Samuels. I'm here with David Scranton, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it truly is all about the income.
And welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it truly is all about the income. I'm David Scranton, of course, here with Sarah Samuels. And today we're covering the top 5 financial regrets of Americans over the age of 50, and more importantly, how you can avoid making those mistakes. So in summary, from this Wharton School study, number 5, 23% say they regret taking Social Security benefits too early. Number 4, 33% actually regretted not investing more in a lifetime annuity or something that generates regular income.
That's right, Dave. And number 3 said that 37% say they regret not working longer. Number 2, 40% said that they regret not buying long-term care insurance to pay for a nursing home or similar.
And you switched the order back to 3 and 2 on me.
That's right. I got my math straight now,
I
Dave.
see what you did there. That's right. You're not trying to trick me. And the number one
Drum roll,
most
please.
common regret is 57% said they were not saving enough for retirement during their working years.
Wow. So more than half said that was their biggest regret, not saving enough money.
Did that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me because I think as a society, Dave, we have this obsession with the amount of money, right? Oh, how big does my nest egg have to be to retire? And I think people get hung up on the amount of money as opposed to the strategy that they're implementing for retirement.
I think that's part of it, and I think a lot of it has to do, too, with longevity, right? I mean, when Social Security actually started, you know, the reason 65 was the full retirement age back then was because you retired at 65 and the average life expectancy was 67.
Right, you're knocking on death's door, right?
Yeah.
When you retire, a few more years and that's it.
Yeah, Social Security Administration said, great, we can collect FICA taxes for 45 years out of people's checks, pay them for 2 years. This is a great deal, right?
Great deal for the government, yeah.
But what happened is people are living longer, right?
That's right, yeah.
So now people are paying in for 30, 40 years, but now they're collecting for 30, 40 years. And what you collect is a much bigger number. So that's an example of where even the Social Security Administration, I'm sure, wishes they had collected more FICA taxes in the early years. So I guess it doesn't surprise me that much that your average person is concerned, because a lot of it has to do with this longevity. Nobody thought that the largest growing sector of the populations right now would be people in their 90s.
Wow. People are lasting longer than ever before, especially in this country.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you don't realize it, you know, when you retire at age 65, age 95 sounds like it's a million years away, right? It's 30 years away. I don't have to worry about that. But then all of a sudden you get to age 80, right? And you go to the doctor and the doctor says, hey, congratulations, you're in great health. I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it because you're in the same health you were 15 years ago when you retired. God bless you.
Yeah, it's good news from the doctor, but can your retirement account handle it?
Well, it's good news if you saved enough, right?
Right, if you
And
saved enough,
Then you
yeah.
go home and scratch your head and say, well, heck, maybe I should have saved just a little bit more because now, you know, if I do live to be 95, I'm already starting to feel the squeeze of inflation, especially after this year, right?
Right, yeah, it's been a bad year.
Yeah, and it's going to get worse over the next 15 years. So I think that's a big part of it. It's all got to do with that longevity realization.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great segue into our Ask Dave question because this question is about longevity. We have Andrew from Oklahoma who says, everyone in my family dies pretty early, like in their late 60s. No one has made it to 90. Do I still need to plan for 30 years or more of retirement?
Well, Andrew, I'm going to pull a Clint Eastwood here. Well, in all the excitement, I'm not sure. I can't remember. You're probably asking yourself, was that 5 shots or 6? Well, in all the excitement, I can't remember either. The question is, are you feeling lucky? So, Andrew.
That might have been the worst Clint Eastwood impression I've seen, Dave.
It was. That's all right.
You got to work on that.
So, Andrew, you know, ask yourself, are you feeling lucky? Are you going to be lucky enough that you're actually going to die at a young age that you don't have to plan for 30 years of retirement? Or are you going to be unlucky that you might just be the first person in your family to live 30 years into retirement? So I say that tongue-in-cheek for 2 reasons. Number one, because I don't think, you know, when you're looking at insuring something, you don't just insure something that has a high probability of happening. In fact, typically you can't insure that. But what you typically insure is those things where it may have a low probability of happening, but if it does, it's financially devastating. And I can't think of anything that's more financially devastating than outliving your income. So it's not just a question of, okay, what's the probability it's going to happen? But you've got to say, how bad is it if I am the first person in my family to live, you know, 30 years in the retirement? But I think the second thing is you have to think about, do I want to be an optimist or a pessimist? You know, do I want to bet against myself or with myself? And I will tell you, optimists live more fulfilled lives. They're happier in retirement. And yes, they do live longer. So I'd suggest planning for that 30 years in spite of your genetics.
Yep. And that's why it's so important, again, to meet with an income specialist that can not just get you to retirement, but can get you through retirement for 30 years or more of planning. So, Andrew, I really hope that helped. And if any of our listeners out there have an Ask Dave question that you'd like to ask Dave, all you need to do is email us at askdave@theretirementincome.source. That's SOURCE.com. And you might hear Dave answer your question on a future show. You're listening to The Retirement Income Source, where, Dave, it is really all about the quality income here. It's an important message for all of our listeners. And today, we've talked about these financial regrets. It sounds like it might be a little bit of a depressing topic, but the reason why we did the show today is we really want to help you avoid making these same mistakes. Maybe you're a little under 50, maybe you're in that age range, but we want to help all of our listeners avoid these regrets.
So let's dig a little deeper into this concept of saving more, just in case you do happen to live 30 years in retirement. Right. And so what are some things you need to think of? Well, first of all, saving is a habit. It's like anything else, right? If you get in the habit of going home and having a bowl of ice cream every night, well, then you're going to have a bowl of ice cream every night. Right. And you might be able to get away with it when you're young, but eventually it's going to catch up.
Yep.
But instead, if you get in the habit of going home and maybe having a piece of fruit, I remember at one point my mom tried to get me in a good habit when I was young because I was getting a little chunky in the 5th grade, where it was green grapes, and I loved green grapes, so we'd sit down and watch television, I'd snack on green grapes. Much better than ice cream or chocolate cake, right? So that formed a better habit that pushed me through my lifetime. Well, the same is true when it comes to money. If you get in the habit early on of spending all your money, well, that's going to be a habit, and eventually it's going to come up and it's going to catch up with you. But if you get in the habit of saving money early on, it actually becomes easy. So start small. If you're starting off work, you start with just, start with a small percentage of your pay in a 401k. It's pre-tax. So what it means is that, you may put $1,000 in the plan, but your take-home pay only gets reduced by $700. And that's $60 a month. And I don't think there's anybody listening right now that somehow couldn't find how to save $60 a month. And then if you start there, then every time you get a pay increase, you could put at least part of that pay increase into the plan. Maybe take half in your paycheck and take the other half and put it in the plan. And if you do that, it won't be too many years before you're maxing out your plan and you've developed good habits.
Yep. Well, one thing I found that was interesting about this survey, Dave, as we're wrapping up today's show, is that the people doing the survey, they found that the regrets increased dramatically when the respondents were encouraged to think about how long they're likely to live.
Yep, it's that longevity
I found that
factor.
Interesting. Yeah, it's all about the longevity. People start thinking about, okay, 5 more years, 10 more years. And it's interesting to me that it really changed the way that they responded to the survey.
Yeah, because people bury their heads in the sand. It's human nature, right? Oh, I could deal with that later. I could deal with that later. And that's why people procrastinate. A lot of people don't get wills and trusts because they don't want to think about, gosh, if I die, what happens? I could do that tomorrow, until you get hit by a car and there is no tomorrow.
Right. And your family has to deal with the fallout.
That's right. So that's why the key is to, start saving early, save what you can, be smart about it. And even if you're not just starting in the workforce, you can still do it. A lot of people get caught up because they get children, they want to save for college. So maybe they overinvest in a house and their monthly payment's too high. Yeah. Well, a house really isn't, your primary residence isn't an investment. Don't overinvest in a house. Make sure you leave enough cash flow available so you can save and invest for retirement. If you want to save for college, and I hate to say this because I don't know what the financial aid system is going to look like moving forward,
right?
But I'm sure it's still going to be there because financial costs, college costs are going up. But for most of us, money that's sitting in a 401k doesn't count against us when it comes to financial aid for your children. So if you just take more money and you tuck it into your retirement plan, you'll have a much lower chance of having this regret of not having saved enough. Yeah. And somehow you'll figure out how to handle college somehow, some way.
I think one of the most important things, Dave, and we say this every week, but you really need to meet with an income specialist because I think an income specialist can help you avoid all of these regrets pretty easily if you just go in there with a plan and you meet with the right person.
At least later in life, so even if you're 50 and maybe you still have some kids at home or some children that are still going to college, that's a good time, even if you're not going to retire till 65 or 70, to meet with the income specialist because it's not like, gee, I'm with a pediatrician, I turn 18, I go to adult doctor for age 19. It's more of a gradual transition into retirement. It's not just a light switch, it's more of a rheostat.
Yeah. Well, if you missed part of today's show and you want to catch up or maybe even send this link to a friend, all you need to do is go to the Retirement Income Source radio.com. That's Retirement Income SOURCE radio.com to listen to all of our past episodes.
And of course, we'd love it if you shared this show with your friends and family. But thanks again for spending some time with us. I'm David Scranton here with Sarah Samuels. Please join us once again next week right here for our special edition holiday show, the best of, right?
That's right, Dave. We're taking a look back at all of our Ask Dave questions from our listeners for this year and going over the most popular questions. So you don't want to miss it. That's going to be next week's episode.
Right here on the Retirement Income Source radio show, where your retirement income matters.